you so much for being our first victim. You're the very first one. And I thought, because I've heard you talk several times, and I said to myself, she'll be great. Just because, well, your background, we're going to touch on that here in a little bit. I don't know how much you can share, how much you can't share, but that's awesome. That you went through all that. It's not awesome.
Went through all that. That's the way to put it.
This is our very first interview slash podcast for the final. What is it? The final
One final twist.
one final
Okay.
twist. Okay, I forget
Great,
things. So
great
one
name.
final twist. It's going to be on YouTube. We're going to do teasers on Instagram and TikTok and all that. And I do want all of
Cool.
the viewers to hang around because we have a really, really exciting giveaway at the end of this. We'll explain all the details when we finish up with Miss Katsu. So, first off, you write some of the most intense books. Like, you take history. Well, I mean, you're known for historical stuff, but you take the Donner Party, the Titanic, World War II. What inspires you to get into the historical aspect or the the period you want to talk about?
Well, it might seem actually kind of backward. I was aware, for instance, I was aware of the story of the Donner Party, and I always thought that was just such an interesting story. And then when I really, went deep and did the research, I realized that there's so much more to it than what most people know, than what we were taught in school. And
Mm.
that really, from the very beginning, when they first set out, it was like they were cursed. I mean, it was just like terrible thing after terrible thing happening to them. And so I thought, this is a story that deserves to have a little bit of the hard treatment. But it wasn't until after the book was written and you start doing the promotional stuff. And, the first question to come out was always, why now? Why do we need to read about the Donner Party now? We know how it turned out. What's the relevance of the book? And so I thought, great question. It's not just going to be for people who are history buffs, for instance. So when I looked at what was going on in the country around the time of the Donner Party, what was driving the westward expansion, I saw a lot of issues that were still with us at the time, which was 2016 was when I wrote the book. And so ever since then, I've kind of looked at it from that perspective. What is it that we can learn from this particular incident in history? And that ends up being what the book is about. So for The Deep, which was about the sinking of the Titanic and its sister ship, the Britannic, I looked at the Gilded Age. And again, there were like so many parallels between what was happening then and what America was going through. This widening income disparity, where you were getting more and more people who were ultra wealthy, who seemed to control where the country was going, whether they were the railroad barons or the steel barons, and a growing class that was living in poverty that didn't seem to have much autonomy or much they could do about their lot in life. So that's the to me that's the interesting thing about writing historicals.
All right.
So I'm just going to jump into. So were you a history buff like as a child? Like was that kind of something that you loved even growing up? Because your knowledge is so deep. So I mean you've had to build on it. I know, but like did you always kind of love that sort of thing?
Sort of. I mean, not how some kids are, like my brother, for instance, like a lot of little boys, he would go through these phases, right? He was crazy about sharks and he had to learn everything there was about sharks. And he had a Titanic period, for instance. So I wasn't quite like that, but I've certainly always found history interesting. And I've always liked historical fiction. I love reading historical fiction now. So, but I'm more of a researcher. So professionally, that's really what I did essentially when I was working in intelligence. And so I'm not daunted by a big research project. I don't mind doing it. I really enjoy that part of it, but really try not to let myself get lost in the research too.
So when you're researching, is there like a moment that like that light moment that clicks on, like, oh, this is going to be, the seed for the next story?
Well, you'd think, right? I mean, sometimes I go in with an idea. So let's take the Deep, for example. I got the idea for that. The Hunger was fairly successful, and so the publisher was asking, "What are you going to do next?" And they wanted it to be another disaster book, right? It was like I was going to become the Irwin Allen of horror novels, and so I was trying to think, what terrible disaster should I write about next? And I do a little research to just sort of see, a lot of things come to mind, but then when you look at them a little more closely, you see that there's not enough there, right? Like a lot of people brought up Hindenburg, for instance. And while that was really interesting, in and of itself, it was not really a pivot in time. This is going to sound very ghoulish, but not that many people died from it. It didn't stop dirigible um, transportation. It certainly slowed it down, but you know what I mean? So I was at home one day, my husband was watching this documentary. I walked in through the room and I heard the narrator say that there was a woman who had survived both the sinkings of the Titanic and the sister ship, the Britannic. And I was like, that's interesting. There could be a story in that. So I sat down to watch the documentary with him, which was the first time divers were able to actually go to the Britannic because it sank in a very difficult to access, really tempestuous area of the Mediterranean Sea. And so, I watched that and that sort of convinced me that there would be a good story in this very eerie, coupling of two disastrous events, one far more disastrous than the other. The funny thing is the guy who was doing the dive that day, Simon Mills, the day that my book came out, The Deep, he emailed me and said congratulations on the book, and he emailed me because not a lot of people write about the Britannic, but he had acquired the rights, the salvage rights to it, so he owns the vessel on the seafloor, and yeah, and we've been friends ever since. He's a wonderful guy.
How does somebody get the right? How do they buy that? I mean, how is that even possible? Is it
you know
because he discovered it?
Well, no, I mean he went down because he had bought the rights. So I'm not sure exactly, but I do think it sort of varies by the country. And I think that I mean it's off the coast of Greece. And so I
Oh,
think it was the government of Greece decided what to do with it. And it's not that they can I don't think they can raise it. I mean, there's limitations on what they can do, and they can't even get down there very often because it's just such a difficult dive. But, he's hoping to do more documentaries on it.
oh, well, that's interesting. One of the things that you're able to do in your books is to create this atmosphere of tension and dread without giving a whole lot away to your plot. How do you do that? I mean I mean that's just how do you come up with that?
I don't know. No. I mean, a lot of writing is kind of a mystery and it's just
Yeah.
sort of in the moment. There's some things you can't really plan, or, you're writing and something happens and you're like, oh, that's good. I've got to deepen it, and so you'll go back and you'll, plant a few seeds for something so that when it comes up later, you kind of feel like it's an echo, right? That it's already been foreshadowed. I mean, I'm not exactly sure. It's just that's how life is for me, I guess. I've always been sort of inclined towards the spooky and the eerie
Mm.
and kind of, keep my eye out for it. And the other thing is, having had that career in intelligence, it's a different kind of life. It's all about secrets, hiding secrets and what people might be. I mean, even your day-to-day life in the office, it's like that. And we can talk about that a little bit. But So I think it just makes me look at life a little differently.
I got you. I got you.
That's actually kind of our next question was how did it's literally the next one. Did how does working for the CIA and the NSA, and the secrets. This is kind of a two-part question because
Okay.
I've read a lot like Adam Sykes, that kind of group, and I know that they have to turn their books in to be read to make sure that they're not giving away anything. So one would be, do you have to, with your history as an analyst, do you have to turn yours in even though they're not like that? And then the other one was how would be like how does knowing about the secrets, trust, human motivation affect your stories?
So the answer to your first question is very straightforward. When you get a security clearance, you sign a non-disclosure agreement saying that if you ever, want to write, and I have to say too, I don't know if they've changed it since I left, which was in 2017. But at that time, they were still very much focused on old technology, right? So it was like they were thinking about writing, are you going to write a book? Are you going to give a speech? So you had to submit the written materials to them, and what do you do today? Are you going to talk on a podcast? Are you going to be a talking head on a television show? I have many friends who retired who do just that. Anyway, so you sign an NDA saying that if you're going to write about anything that had to do with your job, that you will give the agency a chance to do it, to look at it. We call it pre-publication review. So anything I've done that did have to do with my career in intelligence, I have to submit. But all the other stuff, the horror stuff, for instance, I don't have to submit. And, it would be a waste of their time to look at it because once you retire, they're only supposed to be looking for disclosures of classified information. So if you're still working and you have that clearance, there's a bunch of stuff they can actually hold you up for. But once you retire, it's just for the disclosure of classified information. So that's that. And the other question you had, I'm sorry, was about, secrets and all that. Yeah, I'm really coming to see it more the longer I've been out of the life and the more books I publish, that they have this common thread. And that common thread is that they're all nothing's what it appears to be. So even in Fiend, you're reading these characters from their point of view, so like what their thoughts are, what's in their heads. And they don't think they're lying to themselves, but they are lying to themselves. And we see that through their actions. And that's how we come to know them better, really, than they know themselves. But I really do think that I got that from 35 years working, in the federal government and in intelligence, and particularly at CIA, because that is, there's different types of intelligence, and one is called human intelligence or HUMINT, and CIA is the lead agency for HUMINT. Now, we also do something called finished intelligence, which is all sources of information. So you kind of come up with that high level assessment that's looking at everything. But its main mission is to lead on human intelligence. And that's what it's about. It's about training people to go out and find the foreign nationals who have access to the information that you need, the secrets that you need, and to convince them to do something that's really not in their best interest. And that's share those secrets, right, with another
Yeah,
country.
I mean,
And so
yeah,
it's not a straightforward transaction most of the time. There's always some degree of manipulation involved. And when that is the bread and butter of the organization, when that's the culture of the organization, it kind of seeps into almost every facet of your job of what life is like there. So you're used to constantly knowing, in the back of your mind that people are trying to manipulate you, and you're going to have to try to manipulate them to a certain degree in order to get what you need to get done.
that's great. Um, some of your characters, even in Fiend, the women are super strong and they're flawed, but they're just strong women. Is that your? I mean, is that your point? Is do you set out? Oh, I'm gonna write a strong woman here, or I'm gonna put a strong woman here, or is that what part of how you approach that?
No, not really. For my master's degree in writing so long ago, um, back then they did not do genre writing in those programs. It was only what you would consider literary fiction. So, I trained as a to write character-driven fiction. So the characters are always where I start. And so when I was imagining that family, I could not imagine that a wilting flower would survive very long in it. That, the only way not to just be completely overrun or destroyed was that you had to, learn that you've got to fight for yourself. And so, you develop that kind of personality. It's just that kind of family. I mean, they wouldn't, a I don't want to say a weak personality wouldn't
Yeah.
survive, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I mean, and then they're all very different too in their own way.
Yes.
The daughters, particularly Maris, despise that their mother is such an enabler, right? And
Mhm.
they don't want to be like her. And maybe they're just not in the point in their lives where they can understand that that's what their mother had to be, considering the way the father was, how domineering he is, and um, yeah, that there was just no other way for her to be. And this is the only way really that she could survive in that relationship.
Gotcha.
Fiend was kind of a big switch for me as a reader from what I've read before. And then after, of course, I read it, and then I saw some other reviewers were like, not shocked in a bad way, but like, is this what we're going to be getting from now on?
Mhm.
Is she going to flip it up? So what made you decide to like, um, flip the script on your readers?
Well, the story came to me. The idea just came to me sort of all at once. And I knew it was different, but I just was so taken with the story and what a challenge it would be to write it that I just had to do it. I mean, I remember getting the idea, and it was right around the time of this big annual conference in New York called Thriller Fest,
Mhm.
where thriller writers go, and it's there's like 1,200 people there. And you use that time also while you're in New York, to meet with your agents and meet with your editors and stuff on the fringes. And I just had to tell everybody I met about this idea I had because I was just so blown away. I thought it would really make a great story. So I didn't really consider that it was a huge difference. Now I'm thinking about it because, for your career, you really need to sort of stay within a certain lane. And I've already destroyed that by writing several different genres, and right now writing two different genres. And it makes it hard on readers. Readers want to know what to expect, to a certain degree.
Well,
So,
I think variety also, Stephen King, he writes some police procedurals and with just a touch of supernatural in them, but if he can do it, you can do it. I mean, The Fiend was my first book of yours, but I have since gone back and read several of your others,
wow.
and yeah, some of them are really, really dark, but I really, they're all great in their own right. I mean, I like modern more than I do historical, but the spin that you gave the Donner Party and the Hunger makes me want more of that.
Oh,
What was her
well,
name? The
thank
lead
you.
character, the
I'm
female.
sorry, in which book? Because you're dropping out a little
Oh,
bit.
I'm sorry. The Hunger.
Oh, in
The
The Hunger. Tamron.
Tamra. Yeah,
Tamsin. Tamsin, sorry. Tamsin.
she's something else. I mean, she really was. But but then you go back to Fiend, which is modern, and I really liked it too. So I'm going to definitely pick up more of your. I've got a couple of them that I think that I picked up at Books and Brews. But
Oh,
I'm
and
definitely going to read your back catalog more than I have now. I've just started Red London. Is it Red London? Is
Oh, this one of the spy
Right.
novels. Yeah.
yes, I love a good spy novel.
Oh,
You know,
good.
so I'm gonna start it tonight or
Oh,
tomorrow. I've got one I've got to finish up. But
oh
yeah,
my gosh.
yeah.
Well, thank you. I
So
and so I'm a little different from some writers, not all writers. There's
yeah,
a number of writers I think who do like to write in different genres or will try, having a different voice in their work or something. But especially for genre and from a publisher's point of view, the convention is, you should really build a lane and stick in it so that readers know what to expect. And I guess I'm just different. Like I've started writing more short stories in the last few years,
yeah.
and I'm really enjoying it.
Tell us about your. I haven't read it, but I do have a copy of your your part that is in the end of the world as we know it.
Oh, yeah, End of the
The
World as
King
we
book.
know it.
Yeah, end
Yeah,
of the world as we know it. Yes.
yeah.
Tell us a
So
little bit about that.
for your listeners who may not be familiar with it, that is an anthology of stories, modern day, I mean, stories written today from the world of Stephen King's novel, The Stand, which is, God, I forgot how many years it is, 40 years,
Yeah,
something like
it's like the 40th
I think it's
anniversary
40.
coming up. Yeah.
yeah. And so, it was really a historical event, and I'm so honored to have been part of it. But they got about 34, 35
I mean,
writers.
it's a big girl. She's thick.
Yeah,
So
it's a lot. You get your money's worth.
you do.
It covers sort of the whole range of what the original novel covered, the onset of the disease, once it's set in, and then what leads to the final showdown. And we even have like a few things that happen after the final showdown.
Mhm.
So, my book is the last book in the first section, and it's a story about a very young woman who lives in a very rural, remote area. I think I put Tennessee, but it's actually modeled on where I live in West Virginia.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Tennessee, though.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Well, there you go. And her whole family dies and she's left on her own to make some decisions. And there's very few people in her very small neighborhood, not even neighborhood. It's like, a farm community.
Yeah.
And they all want her to leave with them. And she doesn't want to go because even though her family's all dead, her beloved horse, which she has had since she was a child, is still alive. And it's a bit of a miracle because all the other horses have died, like all the dogs have died. But in Stephen King's original book, he had one dog survive. And
Hmm.
so I said, okay, we need to have one horse survive. So anyway, she stays for her horse. And then something happens which she sort of knew would happen one day, and that is a stranger makes it to her farm. And so it's really a story about how women, how we learn to trust ourselves, to trust our own judgment. And yeah, I'm really happy with that story, really proud of that story.
I'll have to read it. It'll be on my list. I'll get it read in the
Let me
next.
know what you think. Now
I
that
will. I
Tennessee's in it,
will.
you're gonna
They're doing a anthology for The Shining. I saw. Have they asked you to do that?
not only have they asked me, but I turned the story in right away. I was so
Hey.
excited that I was like, Jamie, here's the story. And really happy with that story. I can't tell you anything about it. I can tell
No,
you,
I know. It's okay, but that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, that's going to be
Yeah,
another.
have they got a projected pub date on that one yet?
I don't know. I think
Okay.
it's 2027.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know those things take a long time to get everybody get their work turned in, get it edited, get it back, get you to approve it, the editor approve all that. So
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
yeah.
Plus, some writers can be very slow. Me and one other writer, we were so excited. We wrote our stories and sent them in right away. So,
That's awesome. But you're the only one that I've heard that's going to be a part of it. So I can't wait to find out the whole list here in a few months probably.
yeah, he didn't put out I thought he put out like a partial. There wasn't a announcement for the sale that came out of Publishers Marketplace. You might try to look it up
Oh,
because
okay.
I think it had a partial table of contents.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do a little research later on. And you're also in Why I Love Horror. That was your essay was phenomenal in that, and there's
Oh,
so
thank you.
many great authors in that.
So many. I loved Grady Hendrix's uh, chapter. It just shows what a insane, crazy man he is.
He is.
Yeah, and he's a master of storytelling.
He really is. He really. I mean, There's nothing of his, kind of like yours. There's nothing of his that I've ever read that I didn't like. Of course, I have some of my favorites and some not so much, but he's
Right.
one of those that he's an auto buy, kind of like you are now. So,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, really good. I loved his latest book, Witchcraft for Wayward Word
mhm,
Girls. He
yes,
had sent me an advance copy to see if I wanted to blurb it. And when I finished it, I said, Grady, how is it that you, a man, know more about pregnancy than I do? I mean, he really did an amazing job
he
with that
really did. That was a great book. So, but
was.
yeah, whew.
I have a short story question. So do you find, so as a reader, when the short story is just so good, like those novellas are, it's one of my favorites, especially in the horror genre, because you can pack so much into so few pages. It's just like this beautiful creation. I love it. Do you find that challenging compared to writing the whole, like a different, I know it's like two different things, but how do you compare writing, like the challenge in writing the two, a full book versus the novella or a short story?
Well, for the longest time, I didn't think I was really a short story writer at all. When I was in grad school, of course, when you're doing critique classes and stuff, you're doing short stories. And I just never enjoyed it. I had a hard time trying to think of probably because I had a hard time thinking of what it was going to be that could be so self-contained like that. I felt like I was more of a writer who needed a lot of room, to really tell the whole thing and be descriptive and all this stuff. But now, last few years, I'm really enjoying writing short stories more. And probably because partly it's a mystery when I walk into it. I'll have some kernel of an idea. I almost never know how it's going to end. And sometimes I can write the whole story and like I'm sure you'll know what I mean when I say this, and it feels like the key's missing. Like there's just something you need to go in there, and if you turn it a little bit, the whole thing's going to fall in place, right? So one of my favorite stories that I've written, The Familiar's Assistant, and that was in an anthology called Dark Stars a few years ago, and it was just reprinted in This Way Lies Madness, which was a HWA anthology, just came out. Um, that was exactly the way. Like I knew the characters, I could see the scenes, I knew what was going to happen, but there was something missing. And the question, when I started turning it over in my mind, was so it's the familiar's assistant. It's about a man who wants to become a familiar, actually, to a vampire. He hears they're a vampire, but it's not the kind of vampire it's not a handsome, glittery vampire. It's just a monster. I mean, they know this is just a monster. And so it made me think, what kind of a person, what would motivate a person to want to be the familiar to a monster? And then I realized, well, it was his past. And that he's a very damaged individual and what caused that damages and causes him to seek out, the protection of a monster or to be close to a monster because he was close to a monster before. And that's as far as I'll describe it to you. But it's finding that key that makes the story, which is just apparently living in my subconscious, right? That makes it all come together. That's so magical, for a writer and hopefully for the reader.
Yeah. Will you explain to the reader or to our listeners and watchers, tell them a little bit about Fiend.
Sure. So Fiend is on one hand is the story of evil wealthy people, right? I mean, that was the motivation for it.
Mhm.
The Sacklers, actually, after I watched the not documentary, but the show Dope Sick, where
Mhm.
they really exposed how complicit the Sacklers were in ruining the lives of millions and millions of people, by lying about the efficacy and the dosage and all that with their painkiller,
Yes.
just for money, right?
Yeah.
Killed tens of thousands of Americans alone, let alone around the world, ruined millions of lives for money. And it just made me mad, right? How do people like this get away with it? How can wealthy people constantly not be held to account? So that was the big idea. So what I did was I created this family, the Barishas, who are extremely wealthy, one of the wealthiest families in the world. And but people say there's something protecting them. There's something, they seem to maybe be cursed. They say they're blessed, but anyone who comes up against them usually ends up in a bad way.
Mhm.
People die unexpectedly. Manufacturing plants fall, into chasms, after earthquakes or something. So that's the big picture. And the small picture is the the dynamic that's going on within the family. There are three children, they're adults, they're all grown up. And one of them, the middle one, who is a daughter, has decided that she's really the best person to run the family business and become the head of the clan, which is even more important than being the head of the business because she is the most ruthless. She's most like her father, Zeph, who currently runs the business. And her brother, who is the only son, but he's also the eldest, has been earmarked to take over everything. But she doesn't think he's right. He's too wishy-washy. He's not decisive enough. He doesn't have that killer instinct that she has. And so she decides she's going to try to convince her parents to make her the head of the family, to give her, the power. And once she starts on that course, that's when everything unravels and the family secrets come out and the whole thing falls apart. So it's a story of what I just described, but it's also a story about patriarchy and matriarchies because this is an old family and they've always run things the same way, which means it's always been led by a man and it's always the man gets to take over. And here's Maris, and she's very young, and she doesn't understand that just because she's the best candidate doesn't mean she's going to get what she wants, because that's not how the way the world works. And she's going to be heartbroken. But it's that clash of the patriarchy and this rising matriarchy that destroys the family.
And that twist at the end, woo wee.
I'm glad you liked it. Well,
I did.
I had to
I
get my
had to go
phone.
back and I listened to it first, and
Oh,
then I read it, and I was like, I need to go back, and I did. I was like, wow, but it was spot on.
oh, thank
Really,
you.
it was great.
You
When
know, maybe, oh, real quick, just
No, go
maybe
ahead.
your lane could be that your stories are based off of something true, and it doesn't have to necessarily be one genre. That could be your lane, and then and, just like if you don't like it, suck a big toe. It just that's your lane now.
I
Oh,
hadn't thought of it that way.
it's true. What has been one of the most interesting fan reactions to one of your stories that may have put it to you in a different light? Have you had
Hmm,
one of those?
that's a tough one. Sometimes, not so much. I mean, one thing that really sort of surprised me. My my debut book was The Taker, and that came out in 2011. And that also is a very different kind of book because at the time, what was more popular and what I wanted to write was one of these sort of, supernatural romance stories, right? Paranormal romance. I guess it would fall in that category. Although it's not like that, it's extremely dark and very adult. Well, the villain in it is quite the villain. I mean, he's really evil, but he's super charming, super charming. So much so that, like he got voted best villain in somebody's contest. But people wrote to me to tell me they were naming their children and their pets
Oh
after the
wow.
villain. And I mean, on one hand, I was really shocked. But on the other hand, part of the reason I wrote the story was supposed to be to kind of show how women are we're kind of groomed to fall in love with the wrong person,
Ah,
right? The bad, why do we want bad boys? That kind of stuff. As you can imagine, to say that outwardly would not be very popular to the readership of those kinds of books, right? It was almost against the grain of what those books were about. And so when they started naming their puppies and their kids after the villain, it it kind of like made the point, right?
yeah.
But anyway, it's still, I was like shocked that anyone would do that.
If you could be stuck inside of one of your novels for 24 hours, which one would
Mm.
you pick?
And how
Oh my
would you get out?
goodness. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
And how would you get out of it?
Oh my goodness. That's a tough question, guys. Just springing in on people. Um, I don't know. I mean, I could say one of the spy stories because I lived that for
That's true.
so
That's true.
long. So I've already been in it. Red Widow, which was the first spy novel, was actually based on a true event, even though the details were all changed a
Yeah.
lot so that
Yeah.
you couldn't recognize the true event. Yeah, some of that stuff was very close to real life. And I retired. That's how I got out of it.
How many years were you in service?
Altogether, it was about 35. I'm
Yeah,
not exactly sure.
I got you.
Because it was sort of weird. I switched agencies in the middle and then I switched back and um yeah, and then I came back as a consultant for 6 years too. So
Oh, okay.
without counting those, about 35, 34, 35.
Did you when you were in college, years ago, did you have a thought in your head that I maybe want to write books, or did you
Yeah,
always that was your main goal?
that was my plan.
Okay.
Like a lot of writers, I was a reader as a little kid.
Yeah.
And I think, I just love storytelling. And I thought that that's what I would do. And, this was a really long time ago. So back then, it, unless you came from a wealthy family, I think, you didn't know any novelists. You didn't know how to become a novelist. So that was my goal. My undergraduate degree was in writing. I went on to work as a stringer for newspapers for a few years and got the opportunity. And that was while I was still in college, by the way. And then just got the opportunity for the job at the National Security Agency. Back then, the kinds of skills they needed were not things that you necessarily got degrees in. So they did a battery of tests
Mhm.
that ran over several days. And if you had the aptitude for the type of problem solving the tests were geared to, then they would offer you a job. So that's how I got in. It wasn't because I had a degree in computer science. There weren't even that many degrees given out in computer science back then. It was still kind of a new field.
Yeah.
I'm very old. And so that's how that happened. And it doesn't work like that these days.
No.
One of the last things I did at CIA, I spent a year as a recruiter for
Oh,
the analytic corps. And so I, went to colleges. I had the Northeast, so I had like Yale and Columbia and Harvard and Princeton, to recruit kids to be analysts. And they, practically groomed themselves from birth. They decided at a very
wow.
young age that they wanted to work for CIA. And so they did everything they could to make themselves good candidates for it. It wasn't like that in my day. And us old timers would always joke that if we tried to get a job today, they wouldn't hire us.
Yeah. Hmm. That's
So
interesting.
what's
Go ahead.
next for you?
Gosh, well, hopefully a few more books. Um, we've got another contemporary horror novel that I'm doing the edits on right now, and there'll be another spy novel, this one for Thomas and Mercer,
Okay.
uh, in 2027. But knock on wood, we've got three projects in development for TV series, and one is in pre-production. So hopefully one of them will come along, including Fiend. Fiend was optioned
Oh,
before the
really?
ink was like even dry. Yeah.
Wow.
We're
Is
very
there
lucky.
anything, any of them you can talk about the being I mean, if you can, we totally understand because I know how that stuff works.
Yeah, it's very weird, but the one that's the closest, the one that's in pre-production, the producers have already been talking about it to the trade, so I'm assuming
Oh,
it's okay to talk about.
okay.
And that's Black Vault. It was like a novella length story that I did for Amazon Original Stories, and it's basically about a CIA officer who 15 years earlier, he sees something he can't explain while he's out on a mission, and he decides he's going to write it up in a cable back to headquarters that maybe he saw a UFO. And everyone advises him not to do it. It's going to ruin his career because you don't write about non-serious things in cables and send them back to headquarters. But he wants to do it, not because he thinks he saw a UFO, but because he thinks it's probably foreign technology, like Russian technology or Chinese technology, and it'll be a feather in his cap, right? That he's the first one to find it. So he sends the cable, it ruins his career. Fast forward 15 years. The 60 Minutes piece came out from the Navy. You may remember it from a few years ago, where they say, hey, we saw things we can't explain. That's where the term unexplained aerial phenomena, UAP, came out instead of
Mhm.
UFO. And I knew as soon as that happened that all the agencies would get a congressional directive to scrub their records and try to come up with any cases that they may have in their files. And so that's what I wrote it about, that the congressional directive comes in, CIA sets up this task force, and just like I know what happened in real life, the people they assign to the task force are all dead wood, the ones who are retired in place because no one is going to take this seriously. And this guy, Craig, gets assigned to be on the task force. I'll spare you the rest of the details. But the
No, that's
task force
fine.
ends up finding something about his case 15 years earlier, earth shattering.
Yeah.
And so AMC picked it up, and the producers are the producers of Breaking Bad and The Walking
Yay.
Dead. So, yeah, we're very excited about this. We're waiting to hear right now if it's going to get the green light.
Maybe it will. Is it episodic or is it a film?
Oh, it would be for TV.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like episodic, like
Yes, not
series.
not a feature film. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What are you
Let's
currently
hope.
reading?
Fingers crossed. I'm sorry.
What are you currently reading?
I'm reading King Sorrow by Joe Hill.
Oh,
Just
Joey
came
Hill.
out.
It was so good.
Oh, I haven't finished it. I don't even know. I'm reading it on my phone like
Oh
an
God, that's
idiot.
an 800, 900 page book
It's
on your
probably
phone.
going to be like 4,000 pages, but on a phone. And so I'm not even a quarter of a way into it, I guess.
You're in for a
Uh,
treat.
I'm sorry.
You're in for a treat. It's really good.
So
That's
far,
all
I'm
I'll say.
really enjoying it. And it reads so easy.
Hmm.
Just smooth, right?
I
Goes
wonder
down.
where he got his writing genes from, you
Yeah, I
know?
wonder.
Uh,
Yeah, so that's the main thing right now.
yeah, good. Teresa, do you have anything else?
Nope. You answered so many questions, like double that I had, like as you were going. I was
I
like,
know.
oh,
I had my notes over here and I was kind of glancing and trying to make sure I was staying on course. So thank you again. So now thank everybody for joining us. And as we're going to give away a signed copy of Fiend, I was able to meet Miss Alma at a couple of events and she graciously signed it and she stamped it. So this will be given away. We'll have everybody make a comment on the YouTube page and we will generate the names and we'll do a drawing here. Let's see, today is, we'll let it run for a month, but thank you again. Thank you to Putnam for sending me an additional copy.
Wonderful.
So, do
Thank
you,
you. This was so much fun, guys.
thank you.
thank
We
you
do
so
appreciate
much.
it. Hey, everybody. The contest for Fiend is going to run until December the 1st. To be entered into that, subscribe to the channel and make a comment below. Help us get the word out. We want to make this a big success. We love supporting all the authors, big guys, little guys, everybody in the publishing world. We want authors to know that they are appreciated. So do your thing. Y'all have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.